Hello, Michael here again with another Renderman tutorial. This time we're going to be talking about environment shaders. They're pretty useful if you're just setting up some renders of a character. As you can see, I've got a character here with the scene already set up, and I'm just going to show you what he looks like just with one standard area light pointing at him, which is set to a 1.0 exposure. Okay, so he's just got a little bit of light on him at the moment, but if we add an environment light in, just set to defaults and render again, you'll see that he gets a lot more light in the scene, which can be useful if you're just doing sort of beauty shots of a character, for instance. With this character, with this scene, there's a couple of different things that we can do with the environment shader. So the first thing with the options in the attribute editor, you'll notice is exposure. If you boost this up, the values are exponential. So every 0.1, it basically doubles in value. So if I change that to 0.1 in exposure and render again, you'll see that the light value is growing quite a lot. So if I jumped up to 1.0, it's going to be even higher and basically blow the scene out. So you probably are never going to use it to be that high, but I thought it would just be useful to show you that you can do that. So I'm just going to set that down to its default, which is 0. Environment image. So this is if you want to use image-based lighting in your scene, and you can do that by connecting an HDRI image or even a JPEG. Generally, you want to use an HDR image because you've got a better depth of color. So it's a 32-bit depth of color versus what you get on a JPEG, which is 8 bits per channel. So I'm going to connect one now just to show you how that works. So I've downloaded a couple already, which I'll link to in the description so you can find some as well. These are all free ones that I've just gotten. The one you want to get, usually when they come in a package like this, it's the one that's ref.hdr. JPEGs you can use if you just want to do it quickly, but once again, like I said, lower color depth per channel, so you're going to get a better result with the HDR image. And then I'm just going to render that. Okay, so as you can see, that background is now affecting the lighting and color of the light that are hitting our subject. I'm actually going to turn off this area light just for the remainder of this section. So with procedural map, if you enable this, you can basically tell Maya to bump down the resolution of the HDR image that's being rendered. So if you've got it 1024 by 512, you're going to get a faster render time if you're just blocking out your colors and stuff and trying to figure out how your light should be set up. If you want that image to be in focus and 100%, like 100% its resolution, if you bump it up to 8K and render again, you'll see that A, it takes a longer time to render, but B, you get the image in focus and at its full resolution. Okay, so as you can see, the background's now actually high resolution, and the light of the image is affecting cast shadows. You can see the light is more strong from the left hand side, it's casting a shadow to the right, and you can getting some like atmospheric sort of reflection there on the top. So yeah, and the difference, sorry, unfortunately I had a light on there, but you can still see that you're getting that directional shadow there on the right hand side because it's stronger light from the left. Something to keep in mind with HDR images is that if you've got small areas with like very high intensity whites, they're going to create sharper shadows. So with this, to the left hand side of this image, it's brighter. That's where the sun is in this shot, you can see, because it's hitting the left hand side of the clouds as well, but it's fairly large, so the shadow itself is actually quite out of focus. Essentially, it's like got softer edges. If you want harder edges, you need to have light sources that are much smaller and obviously bright as well. Color temperature is something that you're not really going to bother with most of the time. Essentially, this is talking about how many kelvins the light is being like set to. So 65K is what most monitors are set to. It might be different depending on what monitor you're using, but I know on most Mac screens at 65k. I'm using a PC and they're all 65k as well. You can change it on your monitor, but generally I just keep this as it is. Component weights is actually really useful. I'm going to just bump this back down so we can render a little bit more quick. So this controls how much the light source affects different components on your model. So specular contribution, if I want this light source to not apply any specularity to our model, if I put it all the way back down to black or 0 in value and render again, you'll see what happens. So our model becomes basically 100% diffused, whereas you can see the specularity on the top of his head there. It's basically 100% removed there. And inversely, if you increase the specularity but remove the diffuse contribution, you'll get the opposite. So as you can see, you're only getting specularity and you're getting no diffuse lighting. So this might be useful in certain like studio lighting setups. I'll probably do a separate like lighting tutorial if you're just wanting to light your models. But for now, you can see that this is basically what you're getting with the specularity up, but the diffuse contribution down to 0. So I'm going to turn those both back up to 100% now. Sampling, you're basically never going to bother with this unless you're doing some very, very specific things. If you're having issues with noise, it can clean up that sort of thing, but you're going to have to play around a lot with your scenes, and it's sort of more like expert mode. And if you're just getting into this, don't worry about it. It's not a super important thing at this stage. Blockers is something that you might be interested in though. With an HDR image, it might be a bit weird to use a blocker, but there might be some circumstances in which you're wanting to use it. So just by clicking the little like black and white squares, you'll get a blocker put in. Portal's probably the easiest one to show. So as you can see in the scene, one of these guys shows up. If I move this to the right hand side here and point it at him and re-render it, you'll see what happens. So with the portal, what happens is it's actually projecting the image through this portal. So if I rotate the camera and render again, you'll see that the image is inside of this portal and it's projecting its light out. This is probably useful if you've got like an interior scene and you want to like project light through a window or something like that. You get better control in that way, and then you can also increase and decrease the amount of light coming through that portal. Portals and gobos and all sorts of things are like a tutorial in their own, so I'm not gonna go through that at the moment, but I just thought I'd show you what that means. So I'm going to delete that from the scene. Shadows. Shadows on, shadows off. If you turn shadows off, you'll get a render that looks like this, which again might be useful in certain circumstances if you don't want projected shadows from your environment light. If you turn it back on, you can actually change a couple of different settings. So max shadow distance, you can increase that to increase the distance of the shadows being cast. Shadow color, if you want to change the shadow color, I'll do a really obvious one. I'll make it green. That's not green, that's green. And then render it, you'll see that the color of the shadow is being changed to green. If you're doing something quite stylized, this is useful. So if you want like a dark blue shadow, for instance, that might be sort of something that you're looking at just for your particular image. But once again, this is more artistic and less mechanical. So I'm not really going to get into it too much, but that's how you might use that. And that is pretty much it for an environment shader. I'm going to show you one other technique that you can use with the environment shader to create, instead of using an environment image, plugging in a ramp shader to your procedural color to create something like a sunset. Okay, so I've set up a little scene with an island and our guy's back, and I've also put some water in, which you'll see once it renders. If you haven't seen the AA Ocean water tutorial, it's also in my channel. I'll put a link here, but I'm not going to get into that. I've got the environment map light set up as well. It's got a slight pinky tint on it, and it's also got a procedural color a ramp, sorry, plugged into the procedural color. So if you click, actually I'm going to show you how to do it from the start. So let's hide this one, create a new procedural color, change the tint to be ever so slightly pink, and next to procedural color, click this, plug in a ramp, and I'm going to change the black to be the sunlight essentially. So this is going to be a high value yellow, a little bit more saturated. Yeah, around about there. The real trick is figuring out where to put these, and you'll have to play around with it with your renders to find out where your horizon is. With this one, it's close to the center, so I'm just going to put that there because I want the yellow to be peeking out of the center there. Then we're going to add in another color. This one is going to be sort of a pinky red, and it's going to be quite saturated. Yep. And then we're going to change the last one to be sky blue. And we're going to pull them down so it's mixing with the horizon there. And then if I render this, it's going to take a little while, but you'll see that you get a nice sort of sunset. Alright, I haven't let that render all the way out because it'll take forever, but as you can see, you're getting that yellow on the horizon there, mixing into the pinky red. Then you'll be actually getting, if you can't quite see it because it's probably a little bit too much red, but you're actually getting some reflections from the blue of the sky on the top of his head. So, and you can actually see it in the reflection of the water as a matter of fact. So yeah, and the shadows of the island actually are picking up some of that blue reflection. So that's quite powerful. If you're doing something a little bit more stylized, then that's a useful way to do it. And yeah, I actually had a question on one of my other videos of how you might use an environment shader to only light specific objects in a scene. And I'll show you how to do that really quickly before I finish this one. So if you go to Windows and you go Relationship Editors and you go Light Linking, and Object Centric is the way I'm going to do it for now. Let's say I don't want my guy to be, where is it? So first we're going to find our guy. Actually, no, I'm going to change it. So it's the tree is not being lit by the environment map 2. Let's make the tree and the island as well. So neither of those are going to be lit by the environment map. I do have a light source here, so they'll be picking up a little bit of direct light there, but I'll render this and show you what it looks like. So yes, as you can see, the water is still picking up that blue from the sky, and our guy here, he's getting a lot more of that direct light, but he's also getting the reflection of the blue from the sky. But the tree and the island are only getting that direct light from that reddish light that I've got over here. If you compare the two, it makes quite a difference. I believe they were asking because they were doing something with a sort of like atmospheric lighting, so they wanted to turn the environment light off so it wasn't lighting the atmosphere. So if that's what you're trying to do in your scene, that might make sense to you. It might even make sense to you if you're doing this sort of thing. You get a nice silhouette of the tree here if you turn that environment light off, but you still get that nice effect on the water. So it doesn't actually look too bad. I was surprised to see that. So yeah. But that is pretty much all of the things you sort of need to know when you're using an environment light. Obviously, there's lots more tricks and things that you might want to do in the future, and more advanced things, like I said, with portals and gobos and all that sort of stuff. But getting started, this is a pretty simple, sort of straightforward workflow to add them into your environment. And yeah, and you can get some pretty useful results. Like you can see here, this is a pretty good looking scene just with a basic environment light setup. So yes, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please click the like button. If you've got any questions, add a comment below. I'd be happy to get back to you. Like I said, one of my viewers on another video asked a question, and I was happy to sort of follow up here in this video. If you need a tutorial for something that you just can't quite figure out, drop me a line. I would be happy to investigate if I don't know how to do it. If I do know how to do it, then happy days, I'll make one really quick for you. But yeah, otherwise, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. I do a lot of Renderman tutorials and tutorials for other 3D applications. But yeah, until next time, happy rendering.